see me.
We can see you. We can see you.
Yeah.
We can see you. You can't see us.
But in a moment,
You could be doing
you
anything.
can.
Anything.
We're back. We're back. We're back.
But yeah, like this process is at its kind of most heightened when you're a teenager, but it continues all through life. And for both of the detectives, this is very much a reality. Like Stephen is, and was in Faithful Place as well, he's very much a people pleaser. Like he gets co-opted into doing all kinds of things that he probably shouldn't be doing, that probably morally he's not okay with, purely because somebody else wants them from him. He's very willing to turn himself into what anybody else wants to see. Well, Antoinette is the exact opposite. She has no intention of letting anybody have any influence on who she is. And that makes her very hard to get along with, because she refuses to give an inch to anybody around her, and it's making her life very hard within the murder squad. And obviously the two of them they're not an ideal match. And at the beginning of the book, at least, they have no respect for each other and no time for each other. But kind of in the course of it, this process of finding identity and figuring out who you're going to allow to define that identity, they move along in that process and get to the point where they actually kind of like each other and are realizing that they're what the other one needs. And this bit is from very early on in the book, where Holly actually brings Stephen the famous postcard that sets it all in motion. I work cold cases. When we bring witnesses in, they want to believe this doesn't really count. Not really a murder investigation, not a proper one with guns and cuffs, nothing that'll slam through your life like a tornado. Something old and soft instead, worn fuzzy around the edges. We play along. Our main interview room looks like a nice dentist's waiting room. Squashy sofas, Venetian blinds, glass table of dog-eared magazines, crap tea and coffee. No need to notice the video camera in the corner or the one-way glass behind one set of blinds, not if you don't want to, and they don't. This won't hurt a bit, sir. Just a few little minutes, and off you go home. I took Holly there. Another kid would have been twitching all the way, playing head tennis, but none of this was new on Holly. She headed down the corridor like she lived there. On the way, I watched her. She was doing a grand job of growing up. Average height or a little under. Slim, very slim, but it was natural. No starved look. Maybe halfway through getting her curves. No stunner. Not yet anyway, but nothing ugly there. No spots, no braces, none of her face stuck on sideways. And the eyes made her more than another blonde clone. Made you look twice. A boyfriend who'd hit her? Groped her? Raped her? Holly coming to me instead of to some stranger in sex crime? Something to give you. Evidence? She shut the interview room door behind us, flick of her wrist and a slam. Looked around. I switched on the camera, casual push of the switch. Said, have a seat. Holly stayed put, ran a finger over the bald patch green of the sofa. This room's nicer than the ones before. How are you getting on? Still looking around the room, not at me. Okay, fine. I said, will I get you a cup of tea, coffee? Shaking her head. I waited. Holly said, you've got older. You used to look like a student. Yeah, and you used to look like a little kid who brought her doll to interviews. Clara, wasn't it? That turned her head my way. I'd say we've both got older here. For the first time, she smiled. A little crunch of a grin, the same one I remembered. It had had something pathetic in it back then. It had caught at me every time. It did again. She said, it's nice to see you. When Holly was 9, 10, she was a witness in a murder case. The case wasn't mine, but I was the one she talked to. I took her statement, I prepped her to testify at the trial. She didn't want to do it. Did it anyway. Maybe her dad, the detective, made her. Maybe. Even when she was 9, I never fooled myself I had the measure of her. Same here, I said. A quick breath that lifted her shoulders, a nod to herself like something had clicked. She dumped her school bag on the floor, hooked a thumb under her lapel to point the crest at me. Said, I go to Kilda's now, and watched me. Just nodding made me feel cheeky. St. Kilda's, the kind of school the likes of me aren't supposed to have heard of. Never would have heard of, if it wasn't for a dead young fellow. Girls' secondary, private, leafy suburb, nuns. A year back, Two of the nuns went for an early stroll and found a boy lying in a grove of trees in a back corner of the school grounds. At first they thought he was asleep, drunk maybe, revved up to give him 7 shades of shite, find out whose precious virtue he'd been corrupting. The full-on nun voice thunder, young man! But he didn't move. Christopher Harper, 16, from the boys' school, 1 road and 2 extra high walls away. Sometime during the night, someone had bashed his head in. And that's where it all begins. If anybody has any questions about the book or anything about it, I'd love to hear them.
Anybody?
That's a new one, I think.
Anybody have a question?
I haven't read that one.
I actually have a question. I mean, I'm a big fan. I've read all the books that I can get my hands on. And
Thank
you use the characters from each book, you know, from time to time, like in the woods, you used, you know, one of those characters for the likeness, and then one of those characters. And I'm just wondering how you know who you're going to use next. It sounds like Holly reached out to you this time, and you were really curious about her. But that's part of, I think, the thing that keeps me so interested in your next book is to see who you're going to find and who we're going to learn more about and how they're going to be involved in something not so pretty.
Yeah, the poor things. God, I do keep jumping into awful situations. That's kind of one of the reasons that I do the chain link thing, because like I like writing about the crucial moments in a character's life. I don't like the more standard series thing where, you know, you follow the one narrator through the minor ups and downs of life. And I love reading those books. Like I love P.D. James's Adam Dalgleish series, things like that. But I'm not so interested in writing them. I think that if you have the character at the crucial turning point, the narrator at the turning point of his or her life, where no matter what he decides, nothing's ever going to be quite the same again, then you can integrate the narrator into the action of the book like much more deeply. This is the person who's at the heart of the action rather than being just an observer. And you know, if I stick with the same narrator and keep dumping him or her into these crucial, huge turning points, they'll be in a straitjacket, my book. That's never going to work. So that, I think, is one of the main reasons why I go through the narrator switch. And usually deciding who it's going to be just kind of happens. I think a lot of writers have this. About sort of 2/3 of the way through a book, when I'm heading for the home stretch, but I'm not there yet, there's this point where my mind wants to do absolutely anything else except write the book I'm supposed to be writing. It's like, oh, look, that chest of drawers, I should really empty it out and see what should go. You know? Or, oh, maybe I could dye a pink stripe down the back of the cap. That'd be great, and it needs doing today. You know? It's just anything but what I'm supposed to be doing. But luckily for me, one of the things my mind does come up with is an idea for the next book. So instead of thinking about the character I'm supposed to be thinking about, I'm going, oh, you know who's really fascinating is this other character. I wonder what would be important to him or her. I wonder what would change his or her life. I wonder what would do that. And that usually takes me on to the next book. Every now and then it goes a bit wrong. Like after I wrote Faithful Place, where Stephen Moran shows up as kind of, the very pliant sidekick, I thought he was interesting. I thought that fact of him being quite so fluid and so easy to push around was interesting. And I wanted to write about him. But the idea I had was the idea for Broken Harbour, which is very much, it's a book about people who follow the rules, who try to do the right thing during the Irish economic boom about a decade back, a little more, who they're buying this house in an unfinished estate out in the middle of nowhere that they don't really want, because they're being told from all sides, government, media, banks, that this is the right thing to do. It's the only way to have a home for your family. It'll all work out wonderfully in the end. And they follow all these rules. They do all the right things. And then the rules just turn around and kick them in the teeth. And so obviously this book, the more I thought about it, it was about people who play by the rules and what happens to them, what the psychological fallout is for them when the rules go horribly wrong. And that wasn't Stephen. Like, that wasn't what he was about. That wasn't at the core of his life and his big decisions. But there was another minor character in Faithful Place, Scorcher Kennedy, who was all about the rules and all about doing things in triplicate by the book. And so clearly he had to be the narrator of that book, even though at that time he didn't catch my imagination in the same way that Stephen did. I had to write him for a while before I started seeing what was so interesting about him. And so Stephen resurfaced in The Secret Place when via Holly I had started thinking about all these questions of identity. In a way, I think the crucial bit is matching the narrator to the thematic heart of the book, to what this book is really about beyond the murder, underneath the setting. And once that character and that story match up, that's when I've got the beginning of a book.
Right.
That's interesting.
Anyone else? Can you hear me okay, Tana?
Yeah.
A couple questions. One is, how does I think we probably talked about this when you were at the store last time, since I'm also an actor of sorts. How does your acting inform your writing? And the other question, especially for the bookstore staff, is how is it doing a Skype event? This is maybe the third one of these that we've done. How is it for you as an author doing a Skype event versus being in a place physically?
Yo, I would much rather be in a place, especially when it's book passage. I remember it so vividly and loved being there so very much. I mean, it was in the middle of one of these chaotic tours, and I don't know how other people do these tours who aren't writers, because when you're a writer, you get to arrive every day when you've got off some plane and your head is inside out and you can't remember exactly where you are, except that, whoa, it's hot again. And you get here and it's a bookshop, and it's full of bookshop people who love books and want to talk about them, and you're just like, I may not be completely sure what city I'm in, but I feel like I'm coming home. It's totally different. Doing a Skype event is it's not the same thing, but hey, one of these years maybe I'll get to come back. The other question, sorry, just saying, this is only my second Skype event, so if I'm talking too fast or leaning out of shot every 2 seconds, tell me and I'll get it right.
You're doing great.
Perfect.
But the other thing about being an actor, I write like an actor. I definitely write like an actor. I think it's very much the same skill deep down, especially if you write, which I mostly do. I write first person. Your job is to create a character and draw the audience into this character's world and show them the whole story through this character's needs and biases and fears and the way this character wants the reader to see the world, hopefully to the point where they go away feeling like this is someone they know as well as they would know a good friend, hopefully to the point where this is a real three-dimensional person to them. So deep down, it's very much the same thing. I also think it influences like the way I organize a book, because I know writers who, they have everything outlined, they have every single chapter outlined start to finish before they start writing, and like I'm in awe of them, and I also envy them because they know there's a book there, they know there's an ending to this thing, and I'm always waiting for the day where I get halfway through a book and go, oh, there's no ending to this one. I have no idea what to do next, because I don't write that way. I have no idea what I'm doing when I go in. I have that character, I have a strong sense of the character. I have that basic premise, like for Secret Place, it was just this card with the photo of the boy who was a year dead and the caption, I know who killed him. And that was all I had, and a core setting. I usually have like the place at the heart of the book. But apart from that, I've got nothing, because as an actor, I've got to write these characters for a while before I know who they are, who would do what, and who would kill somebody. That's a pretty big thing to dump on one character. And I have to write them for a while before I know who that is. And I think that's very much a function of the acting thing. And I wonder if I'd write differently if I hadn't come from acting.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm really curious, have you selected your next narrator or character for your next book, and can you talk about that, or is that still in the works?
Yes, hopefully, and this is fingers crossed, I am coming towards the end of the next book. This is assuming I don't wake up tomorrow and go, oh, no, there's no ending there. But this time, the narrator is Antoinette, who shows up in The Secret Place, again, as this quite tough, quite hard to deal with detective. And she's still in the murder squad. Stephen has, in fact, got his shot at the murder squad and their partners. They're getting on well, but Antoinette is still not playing well with others. So the tension between her and the rest of the squad is reaching boiling point. Like there's an ongoing campaign of probably well into harassment with the aim of getting her out. And one day she and Stephen get a case that at first glance it looks like your basic lover's tip gone wrong. Things escalated, things got out of hand, somebody wound up dead. But the first thing is that Antoinette realizes that she's seen this victim somewhere before. She can't put her finger on it, but she knows this woman from somewhere. And then the more they investigate, the more they realize that someone on their own squad is trying to nudge this investigation in a very specific direction. And they have to figure out, is this just a part of this campaign against Antoinette? Are people trying to get her to mess up so badly that she'll be thrown off the squad once and for all? Or is there something deeper going on?
Yes, ma'am.
I've read 3 of 4, excluding this one, but the first one was in the woods, right? And I'm wondering whether the mystery of the 3 young boys disappearing into the woods in the beginning of the book, will that ever be solved as to what actually happened to them?
Yes, please.
That I genuinely don't know. The reason it wasn't solved within In the Woods itself was, I think again because I'm coming from a real character standpoint, and to me it wasn't the book so much about that mystery as about this guy and the damage within him, and how he deals with the fact that his mind was cracked straight across when he was 12, and is he going to be able to overcome this? Is he going to be able to take that leap and heal the damage over? And at every point in the book where he's got an opportunity to do something that is irrevocable in one way or another, he runs a mile because of this, whatever happened to him when he was 12. When things reach the point between him and Cassie where there's a point where the relationship could move forward irrevocably, he basically panics, screaming, and runs. And the same with, there's a moment when he could actually probably reach into his mind and find the solution to this mystery that's been there for 20 years, but he's never been able to put his finger on it. And there is that moment where it's within his reach, and he just, because of who he is as a person, he can't make that leap. He just can't do it. He does the same thing and runs screaming. And so I had the option, right? I could either change this character into somebody totally else, somebody who was able to make that leap, which to me, it seemed completely wrong and dishonest for the book almost, or else I could have somebody else show up with a solution, which again seemed dishonest. This Deus Ex Machina thing, I think it's not integrated into the book. It would seem very incomplete and forced. Or else I could just go with keep the character's arc truthful and just keep my fingers crossed that enough readers would see it the way I did, rather than wanting to throw the book at my head. And I do appreciate that there are some readers who are going to want to throw the book at my head, and I respect that. I've got no problem with that. But because of that, there was no way for me to find that solution in a book that was narrated by Rob Ryan. But I haven't ruled out the possibility of coming back to that from some other angle, because I think there are possibilities either that he would reach a point in his life, he would mature to the point where he is able to find that solution, or else that somebody else's story could intersect with that in a way that could lead them to that solution, whether that's what they are actually aiming for, or whether they come across it almost accidentally as part of something else. I don't know, but it's not something that I've hung up forever. It's definitely something I'm still thinking about and keeping it on the back burner.
Interesting. That actually leads to sort of back to social media again. It's, a lot of authors now are talking about sort of the blessing and the curse of social media, that when you write a book, you get instant reaction, and it's good and it's bad, or it can be extreme, or people are correcting you, or saying you shouldn't have done this to your character and stuff. Have you had that in terms of social media response to your books?
I don't know, because I stay right off social media and right away from the internet. Well, I have to. The internet is the world's biggest time suck. I'm bad now when I want to paint the cat 2/3 of the way through. I feel like if I had access to social media, I'd never get anything done. I also find anything to do with reviews for an earlier book completely distracts me from the one I'm supposed to be writing, because of course you're going, wow, are they right? Oh, that's an interesting idea. I wonder if I had put that in, how would the book be different? And you find yourself thinking about a book that's already in print. You're not going to go back and rewrite it. And all of a sudden, you're totally distracted from the one you should be writing. And I think also because I do the narrator switch, and because every book is different in theme and in narrator from the one before, it's not like I can use feedback on the narrator or on the plot in the same way as somebody who is doing a continuous narrator series. it totally distracts me. I end up thinking about that narrator thinking in their mindset, and I'm not going to get the new one done. So I ignore it. I just try to make every book as good as it can possibly be, and keep my fingers crossed.
This is a great answer. Anybody else? Any other questions? Anyone?
Back on the social media thing, actually, from another angle, that was one of the things that was kind of difficult about writing Secret Place, because teenagers nowadays, they operate so much of their lives by social media, and yet that doesn't make for a particularly good book in a couple of ways. Like, you can't really have half of your book written in Facebook posts, and also, well, I suppose you could, but it diffuses it so much. And I was aiming for this real tight, isolated, insulated world, because that's who you are when you're a teenager. You know, it's your friends, your circle of friends is the world. Everything outside is just this blur of white noise that you occasionally have to negotiate with in order to make the adults go away so that you can get back to the real stuff. The world is your circle of friends. And because of that, I wanted to keep the book really tight, really isolated. It's why it's set in a boarding school, in a girls' school as well, so that their world is it's walled off literally as well as psychologically from the outside world. And so I couldn't let them be operating on social media, because then they've got the whole wide world of the internet at their disposal, and that sense of pressure cooker would be lost. So I had to make the school ban smartphones and ban social media. Purely to keep that atmosphere up, and also so that I wouldn't be, trawling the depths of the internet for this potential killer. But they do have phones, and I found that kind of weird, because the experience of being a teenager, that's the same no matter what generation you are. That intensity, where every single decision you make, every emotion is just dialed up to 11, and every decision you make is crucial because it goes into forming who you are, and everything matters just so much. Like, that experience is the same no matter what generation, but the way it's expressed, I think, is totally different for this generation than from any previous one, because they've got phones, they've got Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, all of these things that I didn't have. I didn't have email when I was a teenager, and finding the way that they would negotiate these things to bring out their relationships, and these webs of relationships that teenagers have. Or he told her that she said that, but she actually told me that she said that, and he doesn't know that she said that he liked. Thinking back to it now, I don't know how we all survived. I wouldn't have the energy for it now. But that, I think, takes on a whole different dimension when you're talking about phones, and phones that can be borrowed, stolen. You can impersonate somebody else so much more easily now. And I had to negotiate that through the teenagers' minds and figure out how that would have an impact on their relationships. So I spent kind of more time focusing on the phone factor than on the social media factor. But it was technology was definitely in there in that moment.
And how actually has been the reaction of teenagers that you know?
I
But
don't
not
know.
on social media, just actually talking to people.
See, I'm at that weird age, though. I don't know that many teenagers because I'm too old to have teenage friends, but I'm too young to have friends with teenage kids. And it was actually kind of a problem when I was researching the book, because slang changes. My slang is seriously out of date, and nobody wants to be that awful person who's like talking all down with the kids, yo sup dude. So I found myself, I was lurking on discussion boards that are aimed at Irish teenagers, like nothing deep and meaningful and private, just they'd be talking about their exams or their teachers or where they were going that summer on holiday, but just picking up the slang. And I also did the occasional bit of lurking around bus stops when school was letting out. I must have looked like such a total weirdo, edging quietly closer to all these girls and their conversations. But do you know what? I don't think they ever noticed me. When you're 15, some 30-something woman, I didn't even exist. I wasn't even on the radar. Hopefully I got the slang right, though.
Any final question for Tana before we get off to buying some books? Anybody else?
Can I just say, if there aren't any more questions, just a huge thank you, not just for coming today, but for picking up the books, because I do know that these are great big books. These are big, long things. I mean, The Likeness, the second one, which is the longest, my husband calls it the likeness monster because he's a funny. It is, it's a big book, and I know that people, it's not just cash, people are time poor these days, and to put in this investment of time into a book, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And
I would say, Tana, too, is back to the, the point about being on Skype, because it's you, and because you're an actor, and because you have the kind of personality that you do, you being on Skype is practically like you being here. So, like, I'd probably speak for the people in the audience and say, it's almost like you're here with us. So, thank you so much for doing
Wonderful
this.
to meet you. Yeah.
Thank you guys very much for having me.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you.
Oh, that was a really lovely book shot. I don't remember even.
I'm sure.
All right.
Yes.
Well, thank you all. That actually
That was fun.
went pretty well, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, the other one.